Okay. Bars, has there been any communication to the council and public comments?
There has not been, and the public is invited to ask their questions using the Q&A functionality over Zoom, and so far there are no questions.
We have opened this up to the public.
Yes, it is open to public right now.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
We'll give it about 30 seconds to see if anyone wants to comment.
I will not have any presentation, but I might do one reminder. You have all received the workbook, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. The table numbers have changed a little bit. There are a few new tables. So I just want to make sure there's no confusion.
Okay, do we have any public comments? Anyone raising their hand?
There are no questions so far.
Okay, if we have no communication to the council, no public comments, we'll move on. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the minutes of the meeting of May 29, 2024. Any motions, any comments?
I'll move to approve. Kind of short and sweet.
Second.
Okay. Okay, so the motion on the before the council is to approve the minutes from May 29th, 2024. Vice Chair Maynard.
Aye.
Dr. Bonham.
Aye.
Okay. Council Member let me see, Hayashi.
Aye.
Council Member Lee.
Aye.
Council Member Ostergaard Clem.
I was not in attendance at the meeting. I'm sorry that I missed it. It seemed pretty exciting. I went back and watched the video.
Okay. Okay, so you're going to abstain from the vote then?
Yes, please.
Okay. And Councilmember Hamasu?
Aye.
Okay. The motion to approve the minutes carries unanimously. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the discussion and vote on total personal income forecast for calendar year 2024. Dr. Bonham, you want to start us out?
Can someone I don't have the booklet in front of me. Baybars, I wonder if you could refresh our memory on, oh, there it is. I've got the email. Go ahead.
Please, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just curious what our current forecast is.
Okay, yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to remind. So that information will be in table 6. So last time the council met for TPI was in November 2023. And for calendar year 2024, the forecast is 3.35. And on the same page in table 6, we also have the forecast from the current year for this meeting, 6 different models. And then we have the average of those 6 models, which is labeled as simple average of all models. That stands at 4.68% for 24 and 4.83% for 2025. On the same page, we also report the DBET forecast from their June 5th quarterly economic outlook, and then the Euro forecast from May is in there as well. And then we take an average of all of those things. The Council on Revenues General Fund meeting that the members have submitted, the models, the DBET and UHERO forecast, and that's at the very bottom. So that stands at 4.8% for 2024 and 4.84% for 2025. The only thing I want to point out is that if you move back to the two previous tables, it just shows the fact that the TPI figures are frequently updated. So in our first meeting, we have the preliminary numbers, and then in the next meeting, when we have in October or November, these numbers can be updated. So for instance, for 2022, in July, August, it was 0.5%. But when they revised the numbers, it was down to 0.03%. So these things are subject to change. So depending on that, the forecast can be accurate according to one, but not as much accurate according to the other revised numbers. So just to keep that in mind, that these numbers do get revised. But those are my only remarks, and I'm going to leave you to it.
That's
Dr.
interesting.
Barbaros, I had a
Interesting
question.
how much
go ahead. Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
Go
I was
ahead.
just going to say, it's interesting how much they are revised.
Yes. So what happens is sometimes, it's typical that the previous year might be revised, but sometimes like a whole decade is revised, and that changes all the percentages, understandably. But Carl
Dr.
might have
Barbaros,
more to explain about this
you
factor.
you also did that on table 6 for the general fund forecast?
So yeah, so the general fund one is the members submit their own forecasts for TPI when we do the general fund workbook. So those are the numbers that the average of all the members forecasts. You do submit your own TPI forecasts.
And so the council member forecasts, I'm saw that somewhere. It's not at the top of, see, table 6, council members forecast.
Yeah. The one at the top is our
the general
official
fund
forecast.
meeting. It's the fourth from the bottom, right? So in our May general fund meeting, the average of the council's forecasts were 5.5%.
Yes.
5.52%. Yeah.
These are the numbers you submit individually prior to the models are being run.
And if I remember correctly, the first quarter number has come in at around 5.25%. And
yes,
so
5.5.
Well, first quarter is 5.5.
Yes.
Was that for fiscal year June?
No, this is all calendar year basis.
Yeah, but you're averaging the fiscal years of 2024 and 2025 forecast, right? Because it is to translate it to calendar year.
Oh, yeah. So they're asking how you calculate the council's calendar year income forecast, since we're producing numbers on a fiscal year basis.
We take the average of the 2 fiscal years.
Yeah.
To get the calendar year forecast.
Which is close.
And we should keep in mind that there's often a lot of fluctuation too, quarter to quarter.
Yeah. So if I were to run our model now and update our nominal income forecast, it would be higher than it was when we released our forecast in May. And some of that is because so we do a benchmark revision of employment, and while the year-to-date number, so total job count for the state right now, let's see, I want to say it's roughly 0.6% or 0.5% growth first half to first half. So year over year, first half of 2023 to first half of 2024. But the benchmark lowered parts of 2023, so it would lead to a little bit more rapid job growth than was in our last forecast. And a little bit more rapid income growth. But even more important than that, it's the surge in inflation that we've seen. I should say the surge in the inflation that the BLS is claiming we're experiencing. I have my doubts that they're getting it right. And in our models, that's going to translate into more rapid nominal income growth because of the way we model things. It doesn't necessarily mean that's what will happen in reality, right? I mean, if particularly if the inflation numbers don't actually reflect underlying inflation, because the primary cause of that in the BLS data is housing, and this is Oahu, right? Unlike some of my colleagues have claimed that this includes Maui, it does not include Maui. The BLS data is just Honolulu, and I mean the housing inflation numbers that they're producing just don't make much sense at all. I mean, we're the only state in the country whose shelter components of the CPI are rising. Everybody else's are falling, and I think, I mean, maybe Mike would have an opinion on this, but I don't see it you don't see it in the market data, right? So if you look at Zillow or Redfin or anybody else, no one is showing that rents rose rapidly last year or rose rapidly the year before. Right, we saw it during the pandemic by a much smaller margin than the rest of the country, and then we never saw the pandemic effect in the BLS data. Maybe that's what's showing up now, like 2 years later. I don't know. Sorry, I know I went off on a tangent there, but
that wouldn't impact inflation as far as personal income growth, right?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, so it. I don't know if you're talking about reality or in the data.
Well, we often think, oh, things are growing by X, and then we add the inflation number.
Right.
And I don't think that applies when we're looking at it as much when we're looking at income, because the increase in the value of the real estate is not going to translate to an increase in personal income.
So, I mean, that's
for the most part,
at the crux
yeah,
of whether the Federal Reserve should be looking at this data or not.
Yeah.
They are. I mean, if employers are looking at the CPI data and saying, well, you know, gosh, inflation is this percent, I need to make sure I make my workers whole. Then yeah, it would show up in the income data, right? You would be raising wages more than you would otherwise. Anyway, all I was getting at is that if we were to run our models right now, we would end up with a higher number. The other thing that's going on is, you know, there have been these agreements between the labor unions and the state and now the counties as well. I think the one holdout is the Big Island. I think they're still negotiating, but for hazard pay. And it's not a small amount of money. We added it into our forecast, and it'll show up in the fourth quarter this year. And it, you know, if you were looking at a line chart of income, you see it because, you know, of the number of basically most unionized, except for faculty and teachers, are going to get. I think pretty sure it's $1,000-$2,000 payment, and depending on how many hours you work during the pandemic, you might get 2 of those. I'm sorry, not 2,000, 10,000. It's not a small amount of money. So I guess I'm comfortable with the numbers that really anything between the simple average of all models and you know, and the council's forecast from May of 2024, anything between 4.5% and 5.5%, I think is reasonable. I have no idea how you get below 4%.
So how do we decide, is 5% a good, that's right in between those two numbers?
I think 5% is very reasonable. mean, we're talking about very limited job growth, right? It's
Right.
all got to be coming in the form of wages. We don't get the next minimum wage increase until January of next year. And yeah, and frankly, that's not as huge a deal as you might guess, since most people are not making minimum wage already.
And Carl, can I ask you, so if it is, with this kind of outlook about the construction industry, so that, presumably with the pipeline of construction projects or whatever, that there would be more demand for workers and increased wages, but that would be later on, right?
Well, so the unionized contractors are in negotiations right now.
Yeah.
And so I think that'll show up in 2025.
Okay.
So right, so their wages basically for unionized workers, they basically get set, and then if there's excess demand, there's excess demand, and it doesn't change the wages for that group until the negotiations happen. And I think we should definitely expect significant wage increases there, partly from catch up, and because I don't know if we've talked about this before, but we're at record levels of contracting jobs in the state right now, more than we've ever seen before.
Mm-hmm. Crazy. And would that more than offset any losses that we would have in the tourism sector for?
Well, I mean,
growth?
No, not in terms of the labor of personal income. I think yes, in terms of total
Numbers.
Economic activity, right, and the tax bill, for example, maybe probably not even in terms of excise tax, but if you look at GDP, we think it is offsetting. That the differences, it could offset. I mean, the pay scales are sufficiently different, but the numbers of workers are so much higher in the tourism space that, yeah, I haven't done the math, as you can tell.
There are a couple of things that are concerning, and certainly the tourism industry, the numbers are certainly a concern with visitor spend down despite higher inflation, to your point, Carl. But also we continue to lose population. So those two things would be counter to some of the other numbers that you're talking about, where the labor negotiations where they're demanding higher or getting higher pay. But we're losing people, population just in general. And of course, when the tourism industry slows down, I'm sure that does impact income, because they need fewer people to do what they do.
Hi, Boris, I have a question. Do you recall why we dropped the forecast from last August to last November? From 4.5 to 4?
Probably Maui.
That sounds about right. I am not. I do not recall off the top of my head. It's 3.35%. From last November 2023, the forecast is 3.35%.
Oh, it's not table 4. Well, table 3. It's not table 3. I'm sorry, at the top. Or you're using the adjusted number.
Yeah, there are different numbers here, aren't there?
Yeah.
That is for 2023. Those were for 2020. So that was kind of like looking at how the forecast of the council performed as compared to the actual.
But that was the last time we met, right? Those were the last 2 meetings for personal income in August and November of 23.
That is correct. So when you were forecasting for this year in your meeting last year, the forecast for this year was 3.35%.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Before they started, yeah.
So actually, going back to Regina's and Christie's questions and/or statements, I just went back and looked at what's in our model right now, and we have income growth, nominal income growth in the accommodations and food sector of about 300 million between 2023 and 2024. And we have nominal income growth of about 500 million in the contracting sector between 2023 and 2024. So one of the things we've got to, we have to keep in mind is that as we get into the second half of 2024, we're all comparing it to the post-wildfire 2023. And much of what we've seen in terms of the tourism losses, particularly on the domestic side, really is, it's a combination of things, but it's primarily a Maui story. It's not that we're losing large numbers of visitors across the entire state. Well, or the other counties, I should say. Right, if you look at, say, year-to-date visitor growth on the Big Island, total visitor growth, it's down 1%. And if you looked at it on Oahu, year-to-date, it's up 6%. And that's even though the Japanese recovery has been really anemic. And then on Kauai, it's down 2%. So, but basically, with Maui down about 25%, as we get into the second half of the year, those numbers in terms of growth rates are going to jump. Unfortunately, the visitor numbers on Maui are, the recovery happened when they first, really even before they announced the reopening, but really from October through December was sort of the recovery of tourism on Maui. And since that time, it's been pretty much completely stagnant.
Mm-hmm.
What about with the question on the short-term rentals in Maui being suspended? What do you think the effect of that will be on, just tourists not being able to find places, and really the cost of Maui for the hotel is really high?
All good questions. I mean, we're actually working on it. What I have written in some testimony and without gestures is
Good call, Carl.
that both sides of this debate are wrong. And that's probably to be expected, right? They're both exaggerating both the pros and the cons, and part of that's because the side that's saying the sky is going to fall, or the economy is going to implode, have ignored any substitution that might happen from short-term vacation rentals to other units. They haven't considered whether there's going to be any new construction of resort properties. They haven't considered the fact that room rates will go up further, right? So
right.
you take out 3,000 units in 1 year and 3,000 a year later, rates are going up on Maui. And yeah, we will almost beyond a shadow of a doubt end up with quite a few, much smaller visitor numbers, but it's not completely clear how much lower the spend will be. And obviously that's what matters from the economic perspective.
Right.
And I mean, for our purposes, the good news is we don't have to consider this because it's highly unlikely to have an impact on.
Right.
I mean, first place, it's going to end up in the courts, right? Assuming it passes, right? So it hasn't passed. I think the council genuinely wants to give this a careful look, and it may not pass.
Thank you.
Carl, in regards to the inflation rate for urban Hawaii, what does it stand right now?
I want to say 5. Let's see. It's over 5%, I think. last data point we have is May, I believe. No, let's see. Yeah, so the May is at 5.2% year over year. So it basically went from 4% at the start of the year. It was 3.9 year over year in January, and it's jumped to 5.2. And if you look at where that's coming from, right, the rent component, the rent of primary residents had actually already started ticking up before 2024. It started picking back up in sort of mid 2023, and it's running double digits.
Is there a way to say what component is wages in regards to that inflation rate?
Well, I mean, no. I mean, so usually the way people do that is they look at just the services component, because the service industries, right, the bulk of their costs are coming from wages, right? So so let's see, if I looked at the services, see if I have that services, shelter, rent, owners, apparel. Doesn't look like I have. Let's see, under the specialty indexes. Yeah, I don't have the services component broken out in my data portal. So what is core? So core is now 5.8. But that's, you know, core has the shelter component in there, and which is what's so here we go. All items not except shelter. So everything except shelter, which would be all the housing costs and plus utilities, is all items less shelter 1.4% year over year. So it's all about housing. And so in the national data, there's about a year to a year and a half lag between, right, market rents, right, so new lease rents, and the rents in the U.S. CPI. And at least the market rents that we look at, or the new lease rents that we look at, we saw no pop in Honolulu a year ago or 2 years ago. If you go back 3 years ago, you see it during the pandemic. So maybe we have a really long lag. I don't know what's going on.
So in our calculation for, I guess, the income percentage, or income percentage growth, inflation is not a significant portion of that then. Well, we're not seeing a dramatic impact on wages then?
Are you, I mean, I'm not sure what you're asking. I mean, if income inflation or income growth in the first quarter was 5.5%, and job growth in the first quarter was maybe 0.5%, right? So actually, we could look at what actual wages were. And actually, you have to look at labor income, because there's all these other components in the income data, right? There's the dividends and everything else, but the labor income, let's see, earnings. Yeah, the labor income was actually up. I think it was up 7%.
That's significant then.
Yeah. And so that means, let's see, make sure I'm getting this right. Personal income, earnings by place, personal income was up 5.5%. Earnings by place of work was up 7%. So basically dividends, interest, and rent were only up 4%, and transfer payments were only up 2%, right? And those are big components, right? The dividends, interest, and rent, and the transfer payments they total roughly almost 40 billion.
And don't as a share of the total, isn't it about 20% each? Transfer. Well, I mean,
yes, very close to 20% for each of
I mean, it was
those.
up high at 23%, at the top of COVID, but it's now gone down a little. But I think dividends tends to be around 19% as a share of the.
So they're in the first quarter, they were at 19 billion and 17 billion, and the total personal income was at 96 billion. So still pretty close to, not quite 20%, but pretty close. And so they were growing much more slowly, and the earnings by place of work, or the labor earnings, which is is a combination of job growth, which was essentially flat, and the rest of it was pay raises, right? It was higher wages, which presumably a bunch of that is, catch up because of the inflation spurt that we saw in 2022, 2023, right? So wages don't go up in lockstep with inflation. We all know that. And so a bunch of that was presumably catch up. So I'll make a motion that we adopt 5% for 2024.
I'll second the motion.
Any further discussion? Okay.
So just to put it in, like bullet points for me. So you're saying 5%, and the basic, the justification, 1, 2, or 3 bullet points for the justification for 5.
Well, so probably the most straightforward justification was we got 5.5% in the first quarter.
Yeah.
And this is still a deacceleration, right? We're going from the total personal income. Let me see what it was for the whole year. I think it was a deacceleration, maybe not. Personal income, it's about the same as 2023. 2023 was 5.1%.
Right.
And so we started off with a strong quarter. Essentially, we think that those wage gains are still present. There's also some one-time shocks to wages that are going to happen in the second half of the year. And as we get into the second half of the year, we're comparing ourselves to a period when we saw job losses and all the effects of the Maui wildfires.
Yeah.
And actually, there's another piece that I don't want to get in the weeds, but there could be some income effects that show up literally because of benefits associated with the wildfire. And I don't know how all those get counted, but it's possible that some of them will show up in the income accounting.
Even though many of the other ones overall for the state are decreasing.
Yeah.
Could be where there's a time lag on that one, right? Because isn't there still money that needs to be allocated?
You mean for the wildfire, or are you talking about from the COVID response?
No, for wildfire.
Well, sure. I'm almost 100% certain that insurance payouts do not get counted in any way in income. And I won't try to make Baybars look that up, but I'm almost 100% certain that should not be counted as income. But some of the support from FEMA or others might be counted as income. I just don't know. And obviously support is ongoing.
Okay.
And then the other thing is that, you at some point, and we may already be there, we probably are already there, given the surge in construction jobs that we've seen really over the last 6 months. The numbers just shot through the roof. And, and we were forecasting really high construction numbers for a long time, and we were still kind of blown away by how much they jumped. But that rebuilding that's beginning on Maui is going to translate, it's going to show up in income. Maybe more in 2025 than in 2024. That's been our forecast, but it's certainly some of it is showing up in 2024.
Carl, do you know, so if insurance is included in income, would like settlement payments, legal settlements, so, I've been hearing about the wildfire fund and, the 20 billion or whatever, or I forgot how many billions of dollars that they're talking about. Would that be counted in personal income if they got that?
That's a really good question. Sure seems like you would count it, but yeah, I don't know.
I believe it does. If it's a settlement
Yeah.
money, like if you get insurance for personal injury, or your house burns and you get money for it, settlement money or award, that is considered, I think, part of total personal income.
Because it's not, the settlement part of it makes sense, but like an insurance payout for a wrecked car, that's not income, right? And most of us have experienced that at least once in our lives. And I don't think insurance payouts for a burned house I don't think that shows up in income, but a settlement for sort of, personal injury or trauma, my guess is that that's going to show up in income.
Yes.
So we could get a big surprise at some point.
So like a settlement for like lost business, like lost business income, that would show up as income, as opposed to, settlement to replace your hotel.
It kind of makes sense, but I don't know. You got to dig deep into the bowels of the Bureau of Economic Analysis methodology to sort that stuff out.
Okay, so on sorry, Carl, but on the last page of the handout, which has the definition. So there's personal current transfer receipts. So it's, it breaks down each of the components of the CPI. So here we have consist of income payments to persons for which no current services are performed and net insurance settlements.
So it's a net number, net insurance.
Yeah, and the sum of government social benefits and net current transfer receipts from businesses. So it's a kind of catch-all under personal current transfer receipts.
That sounds like a question for ChatGPT.
Yeah, I think it depends on how you define that, because you can get insurance for life insurance, for example, is different than, as you say, car insurance when you have a fender bender and need repair. And I just, as a counter to all this enthusiasm, maybe that's the wrong word, but DVED's forecast is lower, as you know, where their forecast for 2024 is at 3.8%. So that is lower than what we're thinking.
How do you even come up with that? How do you get a number of 3.8%?
I read it right off their.
No. How do they come up with that number? It's
that.
Obviously anything's possible, but
I just wanted to throw that out as we're listing why we think it would be higher than that. It just has.
So one thing to keep in mind is that their inflation forecast is probably quite a bit lower, would be my guess. We all missed the recent surge in inflation, and while that inflation may not all show up in income this year, it's reason for us not to lower our income forecast too much next year.
Yeah, their CPI urban is 3.6, so lower than what we've been seeing lately. I'm comfortable with 5.
It'll give tax department something to point out to us a year from now about how far off we were.
Well, we had a motion pending and it was seconded. Any more comments? Anyone want to discuss it? Anything further?
I appreciated the bullet points, Carl. Thank you.
But we have to add Christie's bullet point
Add one
for
more.
balance.
If there's no one wanting to, no one has any further comments or questions, we'll take a vote. Vice Chair Maynard,
Hi,
Dr. Bonham,
Aye.
Councilmember Hayashi,
Aye.
Councilmember Lee,
Aye.
Councilmember Ostegard Clem,
Aye.
Councilmember Hamasu.
Aye.
Okay, so the vote carries unanimously at 5% for calendar 2024. So the next item on the agenda is the total personal income forecast for 2025. So Carl, you're talking about how you expected 25 to be even stronger.
You know, I mean, our forecast is that it's basically the same. It's essentially, I mean, the last forecast we released, I think it was 5.2 and 5.3. And I mean, the reason that it would be higher is because of the rebuilding on Maui and the flow of all the federal money and the insurance payouts and you know, other settlements and particularly the building activity. And then the other thing is that, I mean, by 2025, at least our forecasts don't have, you know, visitor spending falling indefinitely. I mean, in real dollars, they're not rising, but we have some recovery of, and someday we'll have more than 50% recovery of the Japanese market. Actually, speaking of optimistic or green leafs, the Bank of Japan raising interest rates moved the yen by almost 5%. And if, I mean, imagine what could have happened if the Fed had cut rates and the Bank of Japan raised rates on the same day and surprised the market. Anyway, so I would be comfortable with 5% again for 2025.
Yeah,
And
I just wanted to, I geeked out a little bit on my summer vacation, but just looking at the, you know, the averages, the annual TPI rates over the last 10 and 20 years, and they're always around 4.2, 4.285 over the last 20 years at the annual rate. So not that that has anything to do with it, but is that kind of a, can you use that kind of like a rule of thumb and then justify against that?
So we would normally use the real income as the rule of thumb, right? And then we would also look at what, you know, the average inflation rate was, right? So we would build up from that, and so you can do it all in nominal terms, right? So the one reason why it might be higher in 2025 than the long run average is because 5% inflation is higher than the long run average.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
So Carl, you know, with the thought of 2025 being stronger, does that also, is it going to be that much stronger to take it? Because I think you mentioned that we're going to have the hazard pay potentially hitting at the end of 2024. So that's, you know, $10,000 per person that, you know, it's got to be that plus, right? I guess for the next year.
Well, there's going to be another payment in 2025. So it's split in two different, right? So it's across 2 different calendar years. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think, so that's basically a wash.
Yeah.
And, you know, obviously you can come up with good stories for how it could be quite a bit lower, right, than 5. If the Fed has screwed up, which is still possible, right? I mean, look, the interest rates are going to be restrictive all the way through next year, unless they start cutting hard and fast. And that no one really thinks that's going to happen. So if interest rates are still restrictive all the way through 2025, they may have messed up already. Just to add to the bullet points.
Bars, what was the total personal income for 2023 and 2022?
So in 2023, it was 5.3%, and in 2022, it was basically 0%, 0.03%.
So you have 5.3 for total personal income in 2023?
Yes,
Interesting. So we have
5.26.
5.1 in our
Not 5.1.
data portal.
Oh, yeah, I took it from BEA. I thought it was 5.1, but
Which is where ours comes from. Anyway, it's
June 28th, but
statistical mumbo jumbo.
what happens is they actually release one in March, and maybe that's what you're looking at, the annual one, and then they revise it one more time with the quarterly data, and that's slightly different than the annual numbers. So that's probably the reason. Even in the same reporting, like if I look at the annual number now, it's going to say 5.1, but since we do a lot of work with the quarterly data, I take the quarterly data and then annualize it. And it's slightly newer data than the annual data in a strange way.
Yeah, I think our annual number we pull straight from their reports. It's all coming straight out of their API, so it's
That makes sense.
So I didn't hear a second. I don't think I made a motion.
No, you did not.
I was waiting for Christy to make the motion this time.
I can make the motion that we leave it at 5% for 2025.
I'll second that. It's my first second.
There you go.
Hey,
Any further discussion?
I got a question now. You mentioned, I guess the insurance or the lawsuit payout, it's like $3 billion, and that's going to be considered as part of personal income or not? I mean, that seems like a big number. I mean, it could throw our forecast up significantly if we don't get that correct.
I think one of the things that is that, as Regina pointed out, it's the net insurance proceeds. So if they are using some of it to rebuild or whatever else, that portion that's being used to rebuild, I don't think counts. Carl's making a face, so maybe that's not correct.
Well, I just don't know how. I mean, so the question is, what's the purpose of the settlement, right? Why are you being given that money? You're being given that money because somebody else was at fault for causing you pain and suffering. Seems to me like that's all income, right? No matter what you do with it. Whereas if you're getting a payout to cover you, whether the settlement is just to cover specific damages, and then maybe most of it's not income. Yeah, I mean, we could be off by several percentage points, or excuse me, several percent, if there's a $3 billion payout and it's counted as income.
Do we expect that in the short term, the $3 billion, or is it going to drag out over several years?
I'm not sure. I don't have an answer to that.
Mm.
I mean, the goal of the program was to pay out quickly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was to get money into the hands of people as fast as possible. So it could certainly it could certainly show up in 2025. But at the same time, Mike, we don't know, right? We don't know that it's actually going to happen. So I don't know how it's a real possibility, but I don't know what the probability is.
And I guess it also depends on the claimants too, right? Because if they're renters, they're not really replacing anything. So yeah, I think in that kind of situation, it's going to be a pure income versus those that have homeowners or whatever else. And I don't even know the details of who gets what, but yeah, that's probably going to be the most telling piece when the details of that settlement come out.
I would file this under something we need to figure out before our next TPI meeting.
And task Seth with trying to figure that out.
Yeah, while he's on leave, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Could you help us with that? For the
Yeah,
next-
I'll research. Yes, I'll dig deeper. Yeah, as Carl pointed out, the details of how Bureau of Economic Analysis really does it would require more research. when I made the presentation 2 years ago, I left it at that, just private insurance settlement money, but this
Yeah, I
is,
remember
yeah.
during the pandemic,
Yeah,
that some of the COVID money was showing up in income. And we didn't think it was going, I can't remember exactly how it worked, but we were
Yeah.
surprised by the extent to which
I remember that.
oh, I remember what it was. It was the PPP payments
Mm.
that they were originally were loans, right? Then they converted them to grants. And then when they converted them to grants, they became income. Yeah. And then we saw those spikes in income that it wasn't just the transfer payments that were the direct checks to households and the unemployment benefits. It was also those PPP grants. So yeah, it can be pretty messy.
There was also huge money in the credits too. That,
Yes.
employee
Yeah,
retention
sure.
credit.
Right.
So I believe we have a first and second. Any more discussion on calendar year 2025? Okay, we'll take a vote. Vice Chair Maynard,
I,
Dr. Bonham.
Aye.
Councilmember Hayashi,
Aye.
Councilmember Lee,
Aye.
Councilmember Osagar Clem,
Aye.
Councilmember Hamasu.
Aye.
So the vote carries unanimously at 5% for total personal income forecast for calendar year 2025. So I believe the last item on the agenda is the next general fund meeting. Barbara, can you remind us when the reporting date is?
The reporting date is September 10th, and that's a Tuesday. So
Okay.
maybe ideally the Thursday before that would be September 5th. But the reporting date is September 10th, and we need a few days.
Thursday afternoon works for me if 2 o'clock is a good time for
We've already
others.
just confirming, you guys will have the data for us for, I guess, August at that point on the 5th.
I believe so.
Okay.
So you're looking at September 5th at 2 p.m. How is that for everyone?
Works for me.
Yeah, good.
Okay, so the next, hearing no conflicts, the next general fund meeting will be Thursday, September 5th at 2 p.m. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. And okay, so bye-bye, you send us the draft report.
Yes, we'll do shortly.
Okay. Okay. Thank you again.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.